The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast hall. Inside, 12 different alien species sat in their designated seats, each one representing millions of years of evolution and technological advancement. The chamber itself was a marvel, a perfect sphere floating in space with walls made of transparent crystal that showed the stars beyond. At the center of the chamber stood a holographic display showing a small blue planet, Earth, the newest discovery in their galaxy. Commander Vex stepped forward first. His body was made entirely of metal and circuits, standing 8 feet tall with glowing red eyes. The construct race had replaced their biological bodies with machines thousands of years ago. They never got tired, never felt pain, and could calculate 1,000,000 possibilities in a single second. "Fellow council members," Vex said, his voice sounding like metal grinding against metal, "we have a problem." The other aliens turned their attention to him. Queen Nala of the Hive clicked her sharp mandibles together. She looked like a giant ant, but her mind was connected to billions of other insects across 50 different worlds. When she thought entire planets moved according to her will. "What kind of problem?" asked Priest Kale of the Altari. He was 12 feet tall with blue skin that seemed to glow from within. His people had developed psychic powers so strong they could move mountains with their thoughts and read minds from across space. Vex pointed to the hologram of Earth. "This planet has achieved space travel. According to galactic law, we must evaluate them for membership in our council." A sound like wind chimes filled the chamber. It came from the wisps, beings made of pure energy who looked like glowing clouds. They had no solid bodies and could travel through space at the speed of light. "Why is this a problem?" their voice whispered through the air. "Because," said Council Leader Thane, rising from his throne, "they are primitives." Thane was ancient, even by galactic standards. His reptilian race had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. His scales were deep green, and his yellow eyes had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. When he spoke, everyone listened. "Show them the data," Thane commanded. The hologram changed to show detailed scans of human beings. The aliens studied the information with growing amusement. "Look at this," laughed Captain Reek of the aquatic race. His fish-like body was covered in scales that could survive in the deepest oceans. "They can only live for maybe 100 years. We live for thousands. Their bodies are so weak," added General Stone of the Rock People. His body looked like it was carved from granite and bullets bounced off his skin like raindrops. "A single punch from any of us would kill them. They have no psychic abilities at all," observed Priest Kale, shaking his large head. "Their minds are completely closed. They cannot even speak to each other without making sounds with their mouths." "No energy manipulation," whispered the wisps. "They cannot even see the cosmic forces that flow through all things." Queen Nala's compound eyes studied the data carefully. "They fight among themselves constantly. Wars, violence, destruction. They have not achieved the peace that comes with true evolution." "Their technology is basic," said Vex, his mechanical voice showing slight disdain. "Chemical rockets, primitive computers, weapons that fire metal projectiles. We mastered these things millions of years ago." Captain Reek swam in a circle inside his water-filled chamber. "They cannot even survive in space without bulky suits and life support systems. We can travel through the vacuum of space with our bodies alone. And yet," said Thane slowly, "they have achieved interstellar travel. They have built ships that can cross the void between stars. By our own laws, written 10,000 years ago, any species that reaches the stars must be given the chance to prove their worth." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the law. It had been created to ensure that no potentially valuable species was overlooked. In the past, it had led to the discovery of 3 races that became valuable members of the galactic community. "Surely," said Dr. Mind of the Brain Race, his massive head pulsing with visible thoughts, "we can make an exception. My people can process information 1,000,000 times faster than these humans. I can solve mathematical problems that would take them years in a few seconds. The law is clear. Thane replied firmly. They must face the trial of supremacy. A collective groan rose from the assembled aliens. The trial of supremacy was an ancient tradition. Any new species that wanted to join the Galactic Council had to prove they could contribute something valuable. They had to face champions from each of the 12 ruling races in combat. It seems wasteful, said Captain Freeze of the Ice People. His body was made of living ice that never melted, and he could lower the temperature around him to absolute zero. These humans will not last even 1 minute against any of our champions. Perhaps that is the point, said General Stone. They will see how outmatched they are and accept a proper place as servants to their betters. Still, added Queen Nala, we must follow the proper procedures. Send them the message. Give them the choice. Thane nodded to Vex, who activated the communication system. A holographic screen appeared showing Earth's surface. They had been monitoring human communications for months, learning their languages and customs. I will send the message to their leaders, Vex announced, though I estimate a 99.7% probability that they will choose to surrender rather than face certain death. The message was transmitted across space, traveling faster than light. Through the network of communication relays that connected the galaxy, it would reach Earth in less than an hour. Meanwhile, on Earth, people went about their daily lives completely unaware that their planet had just been discovered by an alien empire. In New York, office workers hurried to their jobs. In Tokyo, students attended classes. In London, families sat down to dinner. At the United Nations building in New York, Secretary General Adams was reviewing reports about climate change when his assistant burst through the door. Sir, she said, her face pale with shock. You need to see this immediately. What is it, Lisa? Adams asked, looking up from his papers. We're receiving a transmission, sir. From space. And it's not from any human source. Adams felt his heart skip a beat. Are you certain? Lisa nodded, holding up a tablet showing complex data streams. It's coming from outside our solar system, sir, and it's addressed to the leaders of Earth. Within minutes, Adams was in the Secure Communications Center deep beneath the UN building. Scientists and military officers crowded around screens showing the incoming transmission. The message was being broadcast in every human language simultaneously. How is that possible? Asked General Brooks, a decorated military officer who served as advisor to the UN Security Council. Their technology is far beyond ours, replied Dr. Sarah Chen, the UN's chief scientist. They've analyzed our entire communication network and learned every language on Earth. The message began to play. The voice was mechanical, clearly artificial, but it spoke perfect English. People of Earth, you have achieved interstellar travel and have been detected by the Galactic Council. According to the laws that govern all civilized species, you must now face the trial of supremacy. Adams felt the blood drain from his face. Around him, the other officials exchanged worried glances. The message continued. Your species will choose one champion to face representatives from the 12 ruling races of the galaxy. If your champion succeeds, humanity will be granted membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and privileges that come with advanced civilization. And if we fail? Adams whispered, though he already feared the answer. If your champion fails, humanity will be placed under the protection and guidance of the Galactic Council. Your planet will become a protectorate, and your people will serve the greater galactic community in whatever capacity we deem appropriate. The room erupted in urgent whispers and hushed conversations. Everyone understood what protectorate meant, slavery by any other name. You have 7 standard Earth days to choose your champion and accept the trial, the message concluded. Refusal to participate will be considered an act of aggression against the galactic order. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Admiral Torres, the head of Earth's Space Command, was the first to speak. How many races did they say, 12? 12 different alien species, confirmed Dr. Chen, reviewing the message. And our champion has to fight representatives from all of them. 1 against 12? Asked General Brooks. That's not a trial. That's an execution. Adams sat down, heavily in his chair. In less than 1 hour, humanity had gone from believing they were alone in the universe to learning they were about to become slaves to an alien empire. What do we know about these aliens? He asked. Dr. Chen pulled up the data they had gathered from the transmission. Based on the brief glimpses we got, they're far more advanced than us. Some appear to be machines, others have psychic abilities, and some don't even have physical bodies. And they want us to fight them? General Brooks shook his head. It's impossible. Even our best special forces operatives wouldn't stand a chance against technology that advanced. Maybe that's the point, said Admiral Torres grimly. Maybe this trial is just their way of making us surrender without a fight. Adams looked around the room at the faces of Earth's best and brightest military minds. They all wore the same expression, defeat before the battle had even begun. We need to contact the world leaders immediately, Adams decided. Every nation on Earth needs to know what we're facing. Over the next few hours, emergency meetings were called in every capital city on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, and kings were briefed on humanity's first contact with alien life. The news was kept secret from the general population to prevent panic, but world leaders demanded immediate action. The debates were heated. Some wanted to surrender immediately, arguing that slavery was better than extinction. Others wanted to fight, even if it meant certain death. A few suggested trying to negotiate, though no one knew how to contact the aliens to ask for different terms. As the arguments raged, one thing became clear. Humanity had to choose a champion. But how do you choose one person to fight 12 aliens who were more advanced than anything Earth had ever imagined? The clock was ticking, 6 days and counting. In the depths of space, the members of the Galactic Council watched Earth's communications with mild interest. As expected, the humans were panicking. Their primitive governments were arguing among themselves, unable to make a decision. "See?" said Captain Freeze. "They are not ready for galactic society. They cannot even unite their own planet in the face of this challenge." "Perhaps," mused Thane, "but they have not surrendered yet. That shows some spirit, at least." "Spirit will not help them against our champions," declared General Stone. "I could crush their strongest warrior with one hand." "We shall see," said Thane. "We shall see." But even as the aliens dismissed humanity's chances, none of them truly understood what they were dealing with. They had evolved beyond the need for desperate measures, beyond the experience of fighting when victory seemed impossible. They had forgotten what it meant to be mortal, to face death, and to choose to fight anyway. They were about to learn. The war room beneath the Pentagon had never seen so many important people at once. Representatives from every major military power on Earth sat around a massive table, their faces grim under the harsh fluorescent lights. Maps covered the walls, but none of them showed Earth's enemies. They showed the impossible task ahead. General Brooks stood at the head of the table, pointing to a large screen displaying what little information they had about the alien races. "We've had our best analysts working around the clock," he began. "The situation is worse than we initially thought." Admiral Torres leaned forward in his chair. The weathered naval officer had commanded fleets in 3 different wars, but nothing had prepared him for this. How much worse? "Each alien race has mastered warfare in ways we can barely understand," Brooks replied. "The constructs, those machine beings, they've replaced their entire bodies with weapons and armor. Our bullets would bounce off them, like paper balls." Colonel Martinez, representing the Latin American forces, shook his head. "What about the psychic ones, the blue giants?" "The Altari," Brooks confirmed, reading from his notes. "They can read minds, move objects without touching them, and some reports suggest they can kill with a thought. Our champion wouldn't even need to get close. They could destroy his brain from across a battlefield." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Everyone knew they were discussing someone's death sentence. "There has to be something," insisted General Petrov from Russia. "Some weakness, some advantage we can exploit." Dr. Webb, Earth's leading military strategist, adjusted his glasses nervously. "I've run computer simulations based on every combat scenario I can imagine. The results are always the same: complete defeat within seconds." "What about nuclear weapons?" asked General Kim from South Korea. "Surely we could—" "The trial takes place on their space station," interrupted Admiral Torres. They control the environment, the rules, everything. This isn't a war. It's an execution disguised as a fair fight. Secretary General Adams had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now he spoke up. So what are our options? Surrender without a fight? That might be the smart choice, said Dr. Webb quietly. Slavery is still better than extinction. No, the voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see a man in simple military fatigues standing near the wall. He had been so quiet that most people had forgotten he was there. Captain Miller, said General Brooks with surprise. I didn't expect you to speak up. Jake Miller stepped forward into the light. He was not an impressive man to look at. Average height, brown hair starting to show gray at the temples, a face marked by too many years and too many wars. His uniform had no fancy decorations, no medals for heroism. He looked like any soldier you might pass on the street. With respect, sir, Miller said calmly, I think you're all looking at this wrong. Oh? Admiral Torres raised an eyebrow. And how should we be looking at it, Captain? Miller walked to the front of the room, his boots clicking on the polished floor. You're trying to figure out how to beat them at their own game, how to be stronger, faster, smarter. But that's not how humans win fights. General Petrov leaned back in his chair. Then how do humans win fights, Captain? By being human, Miller replied simply. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Dr. Webb adjusted his glasses again. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Miller looked around the room at all the important faces staring at him. How many of you have ever been in actual combat? Not commanding from headquarters, not planning from safe rooms, but actual fighting? A few hands went up reluctantly. Most of the people in the room were planners, strategists, politicians. They knew about war, but they had never walked through it. I've been fighting for 15 years, Miller continued. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, I've been shot at, blown up, stabbed, and left for dead more times than I care to count. And you know what I learned? What? Asked Adams quietly. The enemy always has better equipment. Always. They have more men, more guns, more money, more everything. If wars were won by whoever had the best stuff, I'd have been dead 10 years ago. Colonel Martinez nodded slowly. So how do you win when you're outgunned? You don't try to match their strengths, Miller explained. You use their strengths against them. You make them think they've already won, then you hit them where they don't expect it. General Brooks frowned. But these aliens aren't human enemies. They're far more advanced than anything we've ever faced. That's exactly the point, Miller said, his voice growing more confident. They're so advanced that they've forgotten what it's like to fight dirty. They've forgotten what desperation looks like. Admiral Torres was beginning to look interested. Go on. Miller pointed to the screen showing the alien data. Look at them. Really look. The machine race, they've been machines for thousands of years. When was the last time they had to improvise to fix something with spare parts and prayer? The psychic ones, they've been reading minds for millennia. What happens when they face a mind that doesn't think like theirs? You're suggesting we can confuse them? Asked Dr. Webb. I'm suggesting they've never fought anyone like us, Miller replied. They've evolved past the need to struggle. They don't know what it's like to fight when you know you're going to lose. General Kim shook his head. That sounds like suicide with extra steps. Miller smiled grimly. Maybe. But I've been walking that line my whole career. Every battle I've ever won, I was supposed to lose. Every enemy I've ever defeated had better weapons, better training, better everything. But they all had one weakness. Which was? Adams asked. They expected to win. The room was quiet now, everyone focused on Miller's words. These aliens, they're used to being superior. They're used to their technology solving problems, their psychic powers overwhelming enemies, their perfect coordination winning battles before they start. But what happens when none of that works? What happens when someone keeps fighting even after they should be dead? Colonel Martinez was nodding slowly. You think you can survive long enough to find their weaknesses? I think I can do what every human soldier has done since the beginning of time, Miller said. I can refuse to quit. Admiral Torres studied Miller carefully. Captain, do you understand what you're volunteering for? This isn't like any battle you've ever fought. These beings can kill you with a thought. Sir, I've been in plenty of battles where I should have died. The trick isn't avoiding death, it's making sure the other guy goes first. Dr. Webb was shaking his head. The computer models don't account for chaos, Miller interrupted. They don't account for unpredictability. They don't account for someone who's been trained since birth to fight impossible odds. Trained since birth? Asked General Petrov. Miller looked around the room again. Every human who's ever lived has been fighting a war against extinction. We're born into bodies that break down, minds that can be hurt, a world that's trying to kill us every day. We learn to fight before we can walk. We adapt or we die. He pointed to the alien data again. These species, they conquered death long ago. They don't get sick, they don't age, they don't break. They've forgotten what it's like to be fragile. They've forgotten what it's like to be afraid. And you think that's a weakness? Adams asked. I know it is, Miller said firmly, because every time I faced an enemy who thought they were invincible, they made the same mistake. They underestimated what a desperate human could do. General Brooks was studying Miller with new interest. What's your plan, Captain? Simple, Miller replied. I'm going to do what humans do best. I'm going to survive. And while I'm surviving, I'm going to make them make mistakes. I'm going to turn their advantages into disadvantages. I'm going to show them what happens when superior technology meets human stubbornness. Admiral Torres laughed despite himself. Human stubbornness? That's your secret weapon? Admiral, with respect, human stubbornness is why we're having this conversation instead of still living in caves. It's why we split the atom, why we went to the moon, why we've survived every extinction event this planet has thrown at us. The room was warming to Miller's confidence, but Dr. Webb still looked concerned. Captain, even if you're right about their psychology, the physical differences are enormous. Some of these beings are 12 feet tall. Others are made of pure energy. Size doesn't matter if you know where to hit, Miller said. And energy can be redirected if you know how. I've spent my career learning to turn enemy advantages against them. Give me a week to study these beings and I'll find their weaknesses. Secretary General Adams stood up slowly. Captain Miller, are you absolutely certain about this? If you're wrong, you die, and humanity becomes enslaved. Miller met Adams' eyes without flinching. Sir, I've never been certain of anything in my life. Certainty gets you killed, but I'd rather die fighting than live on my knees. The room fell silent again as everyone considered the weight of the decision. Finally, General Brooks spoke up. All right, Captain, you've got the job, but you're not going in blind. We're going to give you every advantage we can. Over the next 3 days, Miller underwent the most intensive training program ever developed. Scientists briefed him on alien psychology. Engineers showed him every piece of equipment they could design. Doctors pushed his body to its absolute limits. But the most important preparation happened in Miller's own mind. Every night, he meditated on a simple truth that every human warrior had learned. Death was not the enemy. Fear was the enemy. Hesitation was the enemy. Death was just another opponent to outmaneuver. On the 4th day, the aliens sent another message. They had prepared a special transport ship to carry Earth's champion to the neutral space station where the trial would take place. The ship would arrive in 72 hours. As Miller prepared his gear, keeping only the simplest, most reliable equipment, he thought about all the soldiers who had come before him, men and women who had faced impossible odds with primitive weapons and human determination. They had won, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they refused to surrender. On the night before departure, Miller sat alone in his quarters writing a letter he hoped would never be read. In it, he explained his strategy to the generals, his understanding of human nature, and his faith that humanity would survive whatever came next. The last line read simply, "We don't win because we're the best. We win because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten." As he sealed the letter, Miller smiled. The aliens were about to learn something that no computer model could predict, and no advanced technology could overcome, that the most dangerous opponent was not the strongest or the smartest, but the one who had nothing left to lose. The transport ship arrived exactly on schedule. and Miller walked aboard without looking back. Earth's fate now rested in the hands of one ordinary man who had spent his life learning to do extraordinary things. The aliens were waiting. The alien transport ship was unlike anything Miller had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed like water, but felt solid to the touch. There were no visible controls, no buttons or screens. The ship appeared to fly, itself through the vast emptiness of space. Miller sat in what he assumed was a chair, though it had molded itself to fit his body perfectly. Through the transparent walls, he watched Earth grow smaller and smaller, until it was just another dot of light among the stars. He had left his home planet behind, possibly forever. Destination: Station Nexus, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Arrival in 6 hours. Miller used the time to review everything he knew about his opponents. The data Earth scientists had gathered was limited, but it painted a terrifying picture of what he would face. The Altari champion was named Priest Kale. Standing 12 feet tall with glowing blue skin, he could read minds and move objects with pure thought. According to the data, he had never lost a battle because he could predict his enemies' moves before they made them. Unit Prime represented the constructs. It was not born but built, a perfect fighting machine with weapons integrated into every part of its titanium body. It could calculate thousands of combat scenarios per second and react faster than any living being. Queen Nala's champion was not one being but 50, a swarm of warrior insects that moved as a single mind. They could coordinate attacks with perfect precision, surrounding enemies from all directions at once. The Wisp champion existed as pure energy. It had no physical body that could be hurt, no flesh that could be cut or bones that could be broken. It could phase through solid matter and strike with concentrated plasma hot enough to melt steel. And there were 8 others, each representing millions of years of evolution and technological advancement. Miller closed his eyes and tried not to think about the impossibility of it all. Instead, he focused on what he had learned in 15 years of combat, that every enemy, no matter how powerful, had weaknesses. The trick was surviving long enough to find them. Station Nexus approaching, the voice announced. Miller opened his eyes and gasped. The space station was enormous, easily the size of a small city. It looked like a giant sphere made of crystal and metal, with thousands of lights twinkling across its surface. Smaller ships moved around it like insects around a lamp. First time seeing real galactic architecture? Asked a new voice. Miller turned to see a holographic figure materialize beside him. It looked like a tall, thin alien with silver skin and large black eyes. "I am Coordinator Zix," the hologram said. "I will be managing your stay at Station Nexus." "Managing my execution, you mean?" Miller replied. Zix's expression did not change. "That is entirely up to you, human. The trials are designed to test worthiness, not to guarantee death." "How many species have passed these trials in the last 1,000 years?" 3. Miller did the math. "And how many have tried?" 47. "So 44 species failed." 44 species proved unworthy of galactic civilization, Zix corrected. They were given appropriate roles within the galactic community, as slaves, as contributors to the greater good. Miller decided not to argue the point. He would need all his energy for what was coming. The transport ship docked smoothly with Station Nexus, and Miller felt artificial gravity take hold as he stepped onto the station. The corridors were massive, clearly designed to accommodate beings, much larger than humans. Everything was clean and sterile, like a hospital built by machines. "Your quarters," Zix announced, leading Miller to a room that was larger than most apartments on Earth. "You have 4 hours to prepare before the trials begin." Miller looked around the luxurious space. There was a bed that could have fit 10 people, a bathroom with features he could not identify, and a wall screen showing images of the galaxy. But what caught his attention was the window. Through the transparent wall, he could see into the station's central arena. It was a massive circular platform surrounded by viewing galleries that could hold thousands of spectators. Even now, aliens were beginning to file in, eager to watch the show. Quite a crowd, Miller observed. Representatives from over 200 species have come to witness the trials, Zix explained. It has been 50 years since the last one. There is considerable interest in seeing how primitive humans perform against galactic champions. I bet the betting odds aren't in my favor. Current odds are approximately 12,000 to 1 against human victory, Zix confirmed without emotion. Miller smiled grimly. I've had worse odds. After Zix left, Miller spent time examining his equipment. He had brought only basic gear, his standard rifle, sidearm, knife, and a few pieces of protective equipment. Compared to the advanced weapons he had seen on the alien champions, his gear looked like Stone Age tools. But Miller had learned long ago that the best weapon was not the most advanced one. It was the one you knew how to use when everything went wrong. He cleaned his rifle methodically, checking every part. He sharpened his knife until it could split a hair. He adjusted his body armor, making sure every strap was secure. These simple actions calmed his mind and prepared his body for battle. A chime sounded throughout the station. Trial participants, report to the arena, announced a voice in dozens of different languages. Miller took a deep breath, picked up his gear, and walked toward his destiny. The arena was even more impressive up close. The fighting platform was 200 feet across, made of some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light. Around it, the viewing galleries rose up like the walls of a coliseum, filled with thousands of alien spectators. Miller walked onto the platform and looked around. He was alone for the moment, but he could see movement in the tunnels that led to the arena. His opponents were coming. The first to emerge was Priest Kale of the Altari. The blue giant moved with smooth grace, his glowing skin making him look like a living statue. When he saw Miller, he stopped and tilted his massive head. Interesting, Kale said, his voice echoing strangely in Miller's mind. Your thoughts are different. Different how? Miller asked, though he suspected he already knew. Chaotic, contradictory. Most minds I encounter are ordered, predictable. Yours is like a storm. Miller smiled. That's what 15 years of combat will do to you. Kale's glowing eyes narrowed. You are not afraid. I'm terrified, Miller replied honestly. But I've learned to work with fear instead of against it. Before Kale could respond, the next champion entered the arena. Unit Prime moved with mechanical precision, its red eyes scanning Miller from head to toe. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal. Scanning complete. Human designated as minimal threat. Victory probability, 99.97%. What's the other 0.03%? Miller asked. Calculation error, Unit Prime replied seriously. The hive swarm came next, 50 insect warriors moving in perfect formation. They surrounded Miller in a complex pattern, their compound eyes reflecting the arena lights. Queen Nala's voice spoke through all of them at once. We smell your fear, human. It is unusual. Most beings fear death. You fear failure. Smart bugs, Miller said, keeping his tone light despite the sweat beading on his forehead. The Wisp champion appeared as a swirling cloud of energy, its form constantly shifting and changing. When it spoke, its voice sounded like electricity crackling through the air. This one has potential, it whispered. His life force burns differently than others. One by one, the remaining champions entered the arena. General Stone of the Rock People, whose body looked like it had been carved from a mountain. Captain Mark of the Sea People, moving in a sphere of water that followed him everywhere. Captain Freeze of the Ice People, whose breath turned the air around him into frost. The bird champion Alex flew in circles overhead, his wings cutting through the air with sounds like thunder. The plant champion Root stood silently in one corner, vines and thorns growing from his wooden body. The shadow champion, Dark, seemed to flicker in and out of existence, never quite solid. Finally, the gravity champion, Heavy, entered the arena. The space around him seemed to bend and twist, and Miller felt his boots grow heavier as the being approached. Impressive crowd, Miller said, trying to keep his voice steady. Above the arena, A floating crystal began to glow. The voice of the arena master filled the space. Citizens of the galaxy, we gather today to witness the trial of supremacy. The species known as humans has produced a champion to face the representatives of the 12 ruling races. The crowd erupted, in sounds that Miller could not identify. Cheers, roars, clicks, and electronic noises from hundreds of different species. The rules are simple, the arena master continued. Combat will continue until only one champion remains standing. The human may use any equipment he has brought. The galactic champions may use their natural abilities and standard weapons. Miller looked around at his 12 opponents. Each one was a living weapon, evolved or created for the sole purpose of combat. They represented the pinnacle of their species' military might. "Any last words, human?" asked Priest Kale, his mental voice carrying a note of curiosity. Miller thought for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, you guys are about to learn why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Unit Prime's mechanical voice cut through the air. "Illogical statement. Humans rank 247th in physical strength, 198th in technological advancement, and 156th in psychic ability among known species. That's your first mistake," Miller replied. "You're measuring the wrong things." "Explain," demanded General Stone, his granite voice rumbling like an earthquake. Miller looked up at the thousands of alien spectators watching from the galleries. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous? We're the only species in the galaxy that learned to thrive while dying." The arena fell silent. Even the crowd stopped its noise. "Every human who has ever lived has been in a race against time," Miller continued. "We know we're going to die, so we learn to make every moment count. We learn to fight when we're hurt, to keep going when we're tired, to find hope when everything looks hopeless." He turned to face Unit Prime directly. "You want to know our secret? We're not afraid of losing. We're afraid of not trying." The arena master's voice boomed across the arena. "Let the trial of supremacy begin." The champions began to move, and Miller felt time slow down the way it always did in combat. His training took over. His mind became clear, and his body prepared for the fight of his life. 12 against 1, impossible odds. Certain death. Miller smiled and reached for his weapon. This was going to be interesting. The first attack came from Priest Kale. The massive blue alien raised his hand, and Miller felt something trying to crush his mind like a giant fist. Pain shot through his skull as the psychic assault began. Most beings would have fallen to their knees, their minds shattered by the overwhelming force. But Miller had learned something in 15 years of combat that the Altari had never encountered: how to function through pain. Instead of fighting the psychic attack, Miller let it wash over him. He had been shot, stabbed, and blown up. He had fought battles with broken bones and internal bleeding. His mind had been trained by trauma to keep working even when his body was screaming. Kale's glowing eyes widened in surprise. "Impossible. Your mind should be paralyzed." "My mind has been paralyzed before," Miller grunted, taking a step forward instead of backward. "I learned to work around it." While Kale was distracted by his failed psychic attack, Unit Prime's targeting systems locked onto Miller. The machine's arm transformed into a cannon, and energy began to build in its barrel. But Miller had been watching Unit Prime carefully since entering the arena. The machine was perfect. Too perfect. It calculated every move, analyzed every possibility, and chose the most efficient action. That was its weakness. As the cannon charged, Miller did something that made no tactical sense. He threw himself sideways, not away from the blast, but toward Unit Prime itself. The machine's calculations had not accounted for an enemy charging directly into danger. The energy blast missed Miller by inches and struck the arena wall instead. Before Unit Prime could recalculate, Miller slammed into the machine's legs, using his full body weight to topple the 8-foot mechanical warrior. Unit Prime crashed to the ground with a sound like breaking metal. "Error," it announced. "Human. Behavior does not match tactical predictions." "That's because humans don't fight tactically," Miller said, rolling away as Unit Prime tried to grab him. "We fight dirty." The hive swarm moved to surround Miller, their coordination perfect as always. 50 insect warriors spread out in a complex pattern designed to attack from every direction at once. Queen Nala's voice spoke through all of them. You cannot escape us, human. We move as one mind. But Miller had fought insurgents before, enemies who used coordinated group tactics. He had learned that the strength of group coordination could become a weakness if you disrupted the pattern. Instead of trying to fight all 50 insects, Miller focused on the 3 nearest to him. He kicked dirt and debris from the arena floor into their faces, temporarily blinding them. The insects stumbled, and their perfect formation broke apart for just a moment. That moment was all Miller needed. He dove through the gap in their formation, moving toward the center of the arena where the other champions waited. Fascinating, observed the Wisp champion, its energy form crackling with electricity. This human thinks like a survivor, not a warrior. The Wisp tried to phase through Miller's body to strike at his heart directly, but Miller had been expecting this attack. He had fought enemies who used tricks and deception before. As the energy being passed through him, Miller did something unexpected. He grabbed a piece of metal debris from Unit Prime's fall and thrust it into the Wisp's energy form. The metal conducted the Wisp's electrical energy back into itself. The energy being screamed, a sound like lightning striking metal, and lost cohesion for several seconds. How? The Wisp demanded, its form flickering wildly. Lightning rods, Miller said simply. We learned to redirect energy a long time ago. General, Stone of the Rock people stepped forward, his granite fists raised. Enough tricks, human. Face real strength. The massive rock being threw a punch that could have shattered concrete. Miller did not try to block it or dodge it completely. Instead, he used the momentum of Stone's own attack against him. As the huge fist whistled past his head, Miller grabbed onto Stone's arm and used it like a rope to swing himself up onto the giant's back. Stone tried to reach behind himself to grab Miller, but his rock body was not flexible enough. Get off me, insect, Stone roared, spinning in circles. Miller held on tight, using Stone's own movements to stay out of reach. But more importantly, Stone's wild spinning was disrupting the other champion's ability to attack. The massive rock being crashed into Captain Mark's water sphere, sending the fish-like alien tumbling across the arena. Captain Freeze tried to target Miller with his ice powers, but Stone was spinning too fast. The ice blast hit Stone instead, covering the rock giant in a layer of frost that made his movements even more clumsy. You are turning us against each other, realized Root, the plant champion. Vines shot from his wooden body toward Miller. That's the idea, Miller said, finally letting go of Stone and rolling away from the grasping vines. You're all so used to fighting one opponent at a time. You don't know how to fight as a team. Alex, the bird champion, dove from above with claws extended. But Miller had been listening to the sound of his wings and knew the attack was coming. He waited until the last second, then stepped aside. Alex's claws raked across Stone's rocky back instead, sending sparks flying. Watch where you are striking, Stone bellowed. Watch where you are standing, Alex shrieked back. The arena was descending into chaos. The alien champions, each supreme in individual combat, were getting in each other's way. They had never learned to coordinate attacks because they had never needed to. Heavy, the gravity champion, tried to increase the gravitational field around Miller, but the effect also slowed down the other champions, making their movements sluggish and clumsy. Turn off your gravity field, demanded Captain Mark, struggling to move through the thick water of his protective sphere. I cannot target the human without affecting the surrounding area, Heavy replied, frustrated. Dark, the shadow champion, flickered in and out of visibility as he moved toward Miller. But in the chaos of 12 combatants fighting in the same space, Miller kept losing track of which shadow was Dark and which were cast by the other champions. When Dark finally materialized behind Miller, ready to strike, Miller spun around and grabbed the first thing his hand touched, which turned out to be one of Root's vines. What are you? Root began. Miller yanked the vine hard, using it like a whip to strike Dark just as the shadow being became solid again. Dark stumbled backward, his concentration broken. You are using our own attacks against each other, accused Queen Nala's swarm, regrouping for another coordinated assault. Welcome to human warfare, Miller panted, dodging another energy blast from Unit Prime. Rule number 1, there are no rules. Priest Kale tried another psychic attack, but this time Miller was ready. He had learned something important about the Altari's powers. They worked by imposing order on chaotic minds. But Miller's mind was not chaotic because he was panicking. It was chaotic because he had trained it to be. Your mind is impossible to read, Kale said, his blue skin flickering with frustration. How do you think so many contradictory thoughts at once? Practice, Miller said, then did something that shocked every alien in the arena. He smiled. Not the smile of someone who was winning, not the smile of someone who had a secret plan. It was the smile of someone who had accepted that he was probably going to die and had decided that if he was going down, he was going to make it memorable. That smile froze every alien champion for a split second. They had seen fear before, anger before, desperation before, but they had never seen someone smile while facing certain death. In that moment of hesitation, Miller moved. He had been studying the arena's layout since the fight began, noting every piece of debris, every structural weak point, every potential weapon. Now he put that knowledge to use. Miller grabbed a piece of twisted metal from Unit Prime's damaged cannon and hurled it at one of the energy conduits that powered the arena's systems. Sparks flew as the conduit overloaded. The arena's artificial gravity flickered. The lighting systems flashed on and off. Emergency alarms began to sound throughout the station. "What have you done?" demanded Coordinator Zix's voice over the arena's communication system. "Leveled the playing field," Miller said. In the strobing lights and fluctuating gravity, the alien champion's perfect coordination completely broke down. Heavy's gravity powers went wild, creating pockets of zero gravity and crushing weight throughout the arena. The Wisp's energy form became unstable, crackling wildly in all directions. Captain Mark's water sphere burst as the gravity failed, sending water cascading across the arena floor. Captain Freeze's ice powers turned the water into a slippery mess that sent several champions tumbling. Unit Prime's targeting systems could not adapt to the rapidly changing conditions. The machine spun in circles, trying to lock onto Miller's position as the human moved through the chaos like he had been born to it. "This is madness," roared General Stone, slipping on the ice and crashing into Alex. "This is survival," Miller corrected, using a piece of debris as a shield against Root's thorny vines. The crowd in the viewing galleries was in an uproar. Aliens were pointing and making sounds of confusion and amazement. They had expected to see their champions demonstrate their superiority. Instead, they were watching one primitive human turn their technological and evolutionary advantages into disadvantages. 40 seconds had passed since the fight began. Miller was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his armor was cracked, and his body was screaming with exhaustion. But he was still standing, and half the champions were on the ground or struggling to regain their footing. "Impossible," whispered Priest Kale, his psychic powers useless in the electromagnetic chaos created by the damaged arena systems. "Not impossible," Miller said, breathing hard but still moving. "Just human." The final 10 seconds were a blur of desperate action. Miller used every trick he had learned in 15 years of combat: misdirection, improvised weapons, using the environment against his enemies, and above all, refusing to give up even when victory seemed impossible. When the arena's emergency systems finally restored power and gravity, 11 alien champions lay defeated on the floor. Miller stood alone in the center, swaying slightly but still upright. The arena was completely silent. 50 seconds. That was how long it had taken one human to defeat the combined champions of 12 galactic races. Miller looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him in shock. Then he did something that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. For generations to come, he smiled again. And this time, it was the smile of someone who had just proven that the most dangerous opponent was not the strongest or the smartest, but the one who refused to accept defeat. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, from somewhere in the crowd came a sound that had never been heard in the arena before. Applause. The applause started with a single alien in the back of the viewing gallery. Then it spread like wildfire through the crowd. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species were clapping, cheering, and making whatever sounds their physiology allowed to express amazement. Miller stood in the center of the arena, swaying slightly from exhaustion and blood loss. His armor was cracked, his rifle was broken, and his body felt like it had been hit by a truck. But he was alive, and he was standing. Around him, the 12 champions of the galactic races slowly picked themselves up from the arena floor. Some were injured, others were simply stunned. All of them were staring at the human who had just accomplished the impossible. Unit Prime was the first to speak, its mechanical voice filled with something that sounded almost like wonder. I have run the calculation 17,000 times. The probability of your victory was 0.003%. How did you achieve this result? Miller wiped blood from his split lip and smiled. I didn't calculate anything. I just did what humans do. I adapted. Priest Kale rose to his full 12-foot height, his blue skin flickering with confused energy. Your mind. I still cannot read it properly. How do you think in such chaotic patterns? 15 years of combat, Miller replied. Every battle teaches you to think faster, change plans quicker, and expect the unexpected. You get good at chaos or you die. The arena master's voice boomed across the arena, though there was uncertainty in its tone. By the ancient laws of the Galactic Council, the human champion has achieved victory in the trial of supremacy. However, this result requires review. A murmur ran through the crowd. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no trial result had ever required review. Review what? Demanded General Stone, brushing ice crystals off his rocky hide. The human defeated us fairly. But he did not. Fight as we expected, protested Queen Nala's swarm. He used deception, turned us against each other, damaged the arena itself. He used strategy, corrected Alex, the bird champion, preening his feathers back into order. Something we had forgotten existed. Captain Mark struggled out of the puddle. That had been his water sphere. The human fought like prey that had become predator. I have never encountered such tactics. Root, the plant champion, extended a vine toward Miller, not in attack but in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. You made us fight ourselves. That requires understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. Heavy, the high gravity champion, was studying Miller with new interest. Your species fights wars against each other, yes? This is why you understand conflict in ways we do not. Miller nodded. Humans have been fighting humans for thousands of years. We learned every dirty trick, every sneaky tactic, every way to turn strength into weakness. When you fought your own species, fighting others becomes easier. The shadow champion Dark flickered in and out of visibility as he spoke. We evolved beyond the need for such conflicts. We thought this made us superior. It made you predictable, Miller said simply. You all fight the same way, using your best ability and expecting it to work. But what happens when your best ability becomes a disadvantage? Captain Freeze, still surrounded by a cloud of frost, shook his head slowly. We never considered that possibility. The Wisp champion crackled with unstable energy. This human has shown us something disturbing. We have grown soft. Not soft, Miller corrected. Specialized. You're all perfect at what you do, but perfection can be a trap if you never learn to improvise. Above them, the viewing galleries erupted in excited discussion. Aliens who had lived for thousands of years were seeing something they had never witnessed before. Their champions being outthought by a supposedly primitive species. Coordinator Zix materialized as a hologram in the center of the arena. Human Miller, you have created a situation that requires immediate council discussion. Please remain here while the Galactic Council convenes an emergency session. How long will that take? Miller asked. Several hours, perhaps longer. This is unprecedented. Miller sat down heavily on a piece of arena debris. The adrenaline was wearing off, and every injury was starting to make itself known. Well, I'm not going anywhere. To his surprise, several of the alien champions remained in the arena rather than leaving. Unit Prime approached first, its red eyes studying Miller with mechanical curiosity. I wish to understand your thought processes, the machine said. My programming includes millions of combat scenarios, but none match what occurred here. That's because your scenarios assume both sides are trying to win the same way, Miller explained. But I wasn't trying to beat you at your own game. I was trying to change the game entirely. Priest Kale knelt down to bring himself closer to Miller's eye level. Your mind produces too many contradictory thoughts for me to read clearly. Is this intentional? Miller laughed despite his exhaustion. In a way, yeah. Human minds aren't designed for efficiency like yours. We're designed for survival. That means always having backup plans, multiple ways of looking at problems, and the ability to change our minds quickly when circumstances change. Chaos thinking, observed the Wisp champion. Adaptive thinking, Miller corrected. When you're mortal, when you know you can die at any moment, your brain learns to consider every possibility. You can't afford to be wrong. Queen Nala's swarm gathered nearby, their compound eyes reflecting the arena lights. Your species fights itself constantly. This seems inefficient. It is, Miller agreed. It's also educational. Every war teaches us new ways to fight. Every enemy teaches us new tactics. Humans have been learning from each other's mistakes for thousands of years. General Stone sat down with a thud that shook the arena floor. We have not fought true wars in millennia. We had forgotten that conflict could be instructive. Conflict is the best teacher, Miller said. It forces you to innovate, to adapt, to find solutions you never would have considered in peacetime. Alex landed nearby, his massive wings folding against his body. But surely this constant warfare makes your species unstable, violent? Miller considered this carefully. It makes us dangerous, yeah, but it also makes us survivors. Every human alive today is descended from thousands of generations of people who refused to give up, who found ways to keep going when everything looked hopeless. The path of death, said Dark, his shadow form solidifying as he spoke. You mentioned this term before. Every human walks the path of death from the moment they're born, Miller explained. We know we're going to die. We know life is fragile. So we learn to make the most of the time we have. We learn to fight for what matters, even when the odds are impossible. Root's wooden face creaked as he formed an expression that might have been understanding. Other species conquered death long ago. We forgot what it taught. Death teaches you to value life, Miller said. It teaches you that nothing is guaranteed, so you better fight for what you want. It teaches you that the only real failure is giving up. Heavy nodded slowly, the space around him bending slightly with his gravitational field. We have lived so long without real threats that we forgot how to truly struggle. The conversation was interrupted by the return of Coordinator Zix. The Galactic Council has reached a decision, the hologram announced. The arena fell silent. Even the crowd in the viewing galleries stopped their discussions to listen. Council Leader Thane will deliver the verdict personally, Zix continued. The ancient reptilian leader materialized in the arena, his massive form dominating the space. His yellow eyes surveyed the scene, the damaged arena, the defeated champions, and the small human sitting calmly among beings who could crush him without effort. In 10,000 years of galactic governance, Thane began, his voice carrying the authority of ages, we have never witnessed such a trial. Captain Miller of Earth has not merely defeated our champions, he has taught us something we had forgotten. The crowd leaned forward, hanging on every word. We have grown complacent, Thane continued. In achieving technological superiority, psychic mastery, and biological perfection, we lost the ability to adapt, to improvise, to fight when victory seems impossible. We forgot that true strength comes not from never failing, but from refusing to stay down when you fall. Miller felt his heart racing as he waited for the verdict. The Galactic Council hereby declares that humanity has not only passed the trial of supremacy, but has exceeded all expectations. You are granted full membership in the galactic community. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Thane was not finished. Furthermore, the ancient leader continued, we formally request that humanity provide military advisors to help other species relearn the arts of adaptive warfare and strategic thinking. Miller blinked in surprise. You want us to teach you how to fight? We want you to teach us how to survive, Thane corrected. How to think like prey that refuses to be eaten. How to find victory when all logic says defeat is certain. Unit Prime stepped forward. I request to study human military tactics. My programming requires updating. As do we all, admitted Priest Kale. Our psychic abilities made us overconfident. We need to learn unpredictability. One by one, the other champions expressed similar requests. They wanted to understand how a species that had spent millennia fighting itself had become the most effective warriors in the galaxy. There's one condition, Miller said, struggling to his feet. The arena fell silent again. We're not interested in conquering anyone or starting wars. We'll teach you what we know, but only for defense. Only to help you protect yourselves if someone truly dangerous shows up. Thane's reptilian features formed what might have been a smile. Agreed, though I suspect that after today, there are very few species in the galaxy foolish enough to threaten us. As medical personnel arrived to tend to Miller's injuries, he looked around at the alien champions who had become his unexpected students. They were no longer looking at him as a primitive creature to be defeated, but as a teacher who had shown them truths they had forgotten. So what's the first lesson? Asked Captain Mark, water swirling around him as his protective sphere reformed. Miller grinned, wincing as the movement pulled at his split lip. Lesson 1. Never assume you know how your enemy thinks. Lesson 2. The most dangerous opponent is the one with nothing left to lose. And Lesson 3. When you're fighting for survival, there's no such thing as fighting dirty. And Lesson 4? Prompted Captain Freeze. Miller looked up at the thousands of alien faces in the viewing galleries, then back at the champions surrounding him. Lesson 4. We didn't win because we're better. We won because we're used to losing, and we've learned how to lose forward. As the medical team helped Miller toward the arena exit, the crowd rose to their feet in one final gesture of respect. The human who had walked into the arena as the representative of a primitive species was leaving as the teacher of an entire galaxy. Station Nexus was quickly converted into the first human galactic military academy. Over the following months, representatives from hundreds of species arrived to learn the chaotic, adaptive, survival-based fighting methods that humans had developed over millennia of conflict. And in the archives of the Galactic Council, a new law was written. Never underestimate a species that has learned to thrive in the face of extinction, for they possess the most dangerous weapon in the universe, the refusal to accept defeat. The path of death, it turned out, led not to destruction but to a strength that could only be earned through accepting mortality and choosing to fight anyway. And the galaxy would never be the same. The stars looked cold and distant from the observation deck of the UES Vengeance. Captain Thomas Reed stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the twisted metal remains of what had once been the pride of the alien fleet. The collective flagship, now nothing but floating debris against the backdrop of space. It's finally over, he whispered to himself, though he didn't quite believe it. The war had lasted 6 terrible years. Earth and its colonies had survived, but the cost had been enormous. 2 billion dead, 12 worlds with surfaces scorched beyond recognition. The once mighty human fleet reduced to less than a third of its former strength. Thomas ran a hand through his short gray hair. At 45, he had spent nearly his entire adult life in the military, but nothing had prepared him for the brutality of this conflict. The collective had appeared without warning at the edge of human space, their strange biomechanical ships unlike anything humans had ever seen. Captain, a voice called from behind him. Thomas turned to see Lieutenant Anna Wilson approaching. His executive officer was 32, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a mind that worked like a tactical computer. Her uniform was perfectly pressed despite the fact that neither of them had slept in over 48 hours. Lieutenant, Thomas acknowledged. What brings you here instead of getting some well-deserved rest? Anna's face was grim. She held out a secure data tablet, its screen glowing with information classified at the highest level. Sir, intelligence just sent this over. I think you need to see it immediately. Thomas took the tablet and began reading. With each swipe of his finger across the screen, his expression grew darker. When he finished, he looked up at Anna, his blue eyes hard as ice. Are they certain about this? Yes, sir. 3 separate analysis teams came to the same conclusion. Thomas looked back at the remains of the alien fleet. What he had just read changed everything. The collective shouldn't have known Earth's defense grid frequencies. They shouldn't have had the locations of the hidden colony worlds. They shouldn't have been able to bypass the automated warning systems at Jupiter. Someone had given them that information. Not just someone, many someones working together. Humans. Traitors, Thomas said, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. Yes, sir. And they were highly placed. Military command, colonial administration, intelligence services. Thomas handed the tablet back to Anna. We need to inform Admiral Porter immediately. The space station Artemis hung in orbit around Earth's moon, its structure showing the scars of recent battle. Large sections were still open to space, repair crews in pressure suits working continuously to restore the damaged areas. Admiral James Porter's temporary office was located in one of the few intact sections. At 60, Porter was a living legend, the architect of the strategy that had finally turned the tide against the collective. His left arm was a prosthetic, lost during the Battle of Proxima Centauri, and a long scar ran from his right eye down to his chin. Read, he said as Thomas entered. Glad you could make it. Sit down. Thomas took the offered seat. Through the office viewport, Earth was visible, blue and green and alive despite everything that had happened. I assume you've seen the intelligence reports, Porter said. Yes, sir. Hard to believe. Porter's weathered face showed no emotion. Believe it. We've been betrayed by our own, and now that the war is officially over, most of those traitors think they've gotten away with it. He pressed a button on his desk and a holographic display appeared between them, showing faces and names, dozens of them, with connecting lines indicating relationships and communication patterns. This is what we know so far, Porter explained. The network calls itself the Ascended. They believe the collective represents the next stage of evolution, and humans should willingly join them. During the war, they provided critical information that cost us battles, ships, and lives. Thomas leaned forward, scanning the faces. Some he recognized. Military officers, politicians, scientists. With all respect, Admiral, why are you telling me this? This looks like a matter for internal security. Porter's eyes narrowed. Because internal security is compromised. We don't know how deep this goes or who we can trust. He waved his hand, and the hologram changed to show a ship. Sleek, fast, heavily armed despite its relatively small size. This is the Vengeance's new configuration. Officially, your ship and crew are being reassigned to post-war patrol duty. Unofficially, I'm giving you a different mission. Find these traitors. Hunt them down wherever they've scattered across the galaxy. Bring them to justice, or deliver justice yourself if necessary. Thomas felt the weight of the responsibility, settling on his shoulders. Why me? Because I watched you during the war, Reed. You never compromised, never gave up, and most importantly, you were never in a position to know certain classified information that was leaked. You're one of the few I can be absolutely certain wasn't turned. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll need to choose my own team. People I trust completely. Already approved. Your Exo Wilson is clean. Her family was on New Sydney when the collective hit it thanks to leaked defense plans. She has every reason to hate traitors. For the rest, use your judgment, but keep the circle small. Porter stood and walked to the viewport looking out at Earth. They think the war is over, but for you and your team it's just beginning. These traitors wouldn't just have given up their humanity for nothing. They're planning something. Find out what before... An alarm suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights began flashing. Security breach in Section 4. announced a computerized voice. Unknown hostiles detected. Porter swore, pulling a sidearm from his desk. Someone knows about this meeting. You need to get to your ship now. He tossed Thomas a data crystal. Everything we know about the traitor network is on this. Get it out of here. Thomas caught the crystal. Sir, you should come with... No. Time. I'll hold them here and lock down the secure files. Go, Captain, that's an order. Thomas hesitated only a moment before nodding sharply and heading for the door. In the corridor, chaos reigned. Station personnel ran in all directions as emergency bulkheads began to close. Thomas sprinted toward the docking bay where his shuttle waited. Halfway there, an explosion rocked the station, throwing him against a wall. He pushed himself up and continued running. When he reached the bay, Anna was waiting with 2 security officers, keeping the shuttle secure. Captain, what's happening? She asked as they hurried aboard. We've been compromised, Thomas said, showing the crystal into a secure pocket. Get us back to the Vengeance immediately. As their shuttle pulled away from the station, Thomas looked back through the viewport. A secondary explosion bloomed. From the area where Porter's office had been, fire briefly visible before the vacuum of space extinguished it. His communicator crackled with a broken transmission. Read, they're everywhere. Trust no one. Find them all. Porter's voice, cut short by static. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, then turned to Anna. Set course for the Vengeance. We have work to do. The war against the Collective was over. The hunt for the traitors had just begun. 3 months had passed since the attack on Artemis Station. The UES Vengeance drifted silently toward the space station Nova Haven, its weapons hidden and its military markings covered with the insignia of a common merchant vessel. Captain Thomas. Reed stood on the bridge watching the busy trading hub grow larger on the main screen. Nova Haven sat at the edge of what had once been collective space, a place where humans and a dozen alien species now mixed freely, exchanging goods and information. Status report, Thomas said, his voice low. Lieutenant Anna Wilson looked up from her console. All systems normal, Captain. Our disguise is holding. No signs we've been detected as a military vessel. And our target? Marcus confirms Reese's ship docked 6 hours ago. He hasn't left the station. Thomas nodded. Victor Reese had once been a senior logistics officer for Earth's Defense Forces. The data from Admiral Porter had identified him as a likely member of the traitor network. For weeks they had been tracking his movements, following a trail of encrypted communications that led them here. Good. Time to put our plan into action. Thomas turned to face the team he had personally selected for this mission. Marcus Lee sat at the communication station, his fingers dancing across the controls as he monitored transmissions from the station. Only 30, Marcus had a genius for decryption and signal analysis. During the war, he had broken 3 different collective communication codes. Dr. Eliza Voss stood near the tactical display, studying the station layout. A xenopsychologist, with experience studying collective behavior patterns, she had lost her husband in the Battle of Titan. Her expertise would be vital in understanding how the alien influence had affected the human traitors. Remember, Thomas said to them all, we're here to capture Reese alive if possible. We need what he knows. The station was crowded with beings from a dozen worlds. Humans brushed shoulders with tall, thin aliens from the Orion sectors and stocky traitors from the mining colonies. Music and conversation filled the air, along with the smell of food from various worlds. Anna moved through the crowd with practiced ease, a small weapon hidden under her jacket. She found her position on the 2nd level of the market district, with a clear view of the meeting point Marcus had identified. In position, she said quietly into her communicator. Copy that, Thomas replied from his position near the main entrance. Marcus, any update on Reese's movements? Marcus's voice came through clearly in their earpieces. He's left his quarters and is heading your way, not alone. I count 4 others with him, sending their images to your displays now. Thomas glanced at the small screen on his wrist. The faces of 4 men appeared, all with military bearing despite their civilian clothes. His blood ran cold as he recognized one of them. That's Robert Green, he said. He was reported dead at the Battle of Titan. Confirmed, Eliza replied from her position in a small cafe across from the meeting point. And there's something else. My scanner is picking up unusual neural patterns. They have implants of some kind. Thomas watched as Reese and his guards entered the market area. The former logistics officer looked nervous, constantly scanning his surroundings. Whatever he was here for, it was important. Everyone hold position, Thomas ordered. Let's see who he's meeting. For nearly an hour, Reese and his guards waited. Then a hooded figure approached them, passing something small to Reese. As they talked, Eliza's voice came through with urgency. Captain, I can see Reese's neck from here. There's some kind of implant at the base of his skull, similar to devices found on captured collective agents. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just collaboration, this was something worse. Marcus, are you getting any of their conversation? Fragments only. Something about the Ascended and the Convergence. Wait, they've spotted me. Thomas saw one of the guards, Green, suddenly look up toward Marcus's position. The guard's hand went inside his jacket. Cover blown, move in, Thomas shouted, drawing his weapon. The market erupted into chaos. Civilians screamed and ran as energy bolts cut through the air. Thomas dove behind a market stall as return fire came from Reese's guards. Anna's precise shots from her elevated position took down 2 of the guards. Thomas rolled out from cover and fired, hitting another in the shoulder. Green grabbed Reese and started pulling him toward an exit. Thomas sprinted after them, leaping over fallen market goods. Stop them, he shouted to Eliza, who was positioned near the exit. Eliza stepped out, raising a neural disruptor, a non-lethal weapon designed to temporarily overload the nervous system. She fired at Reese, who dropped to the ground, convulsing. Green turned, firing wildly at Eliza. She dove for cover, but not before a bolt grazed her arm. Thomas closed the distance and tackled Green, sending them both crashing into a wall. They fought brutally, hand to hand. Green was stronger than any normal human should be, his eyes wild with fury. He managed to throw Thomas off and ran for the exit, disappearing into the panicked crowd. Thomas scrambled to his feet, gasping for breath. Secure Reese, he ordered. Anna was already there, binding Reese's hands with restraints. The former officer was conscious but dazed from the neural disruptor. We need to move, Marcus said, joining them. Station security is coming. Back on the Vengeance, they held Reese in the ship's small brig. Dr. Voss had sedated him and was examining the implant at the base of his skull. I've never seen anything exactly like this, she said, showing Thomas the scans. It's collective technology, but modified for human neural patterns. It seems to create a connection between his mind and something else. Can you remove it? Thomas asked. Not safely. It's integrated with his brainstem. Removing it would kill him. Thomas looked through the barrier at their prisoner. How soon can you question him? I've developed a compound that should temporarily suppress the implant's influence. Give me an hour. The questioning revealed horrors beyond what they had imagined. Reese sat slumped in his chair, the drugs making him compliant as Eliza asked careful questions. The Ascended, Reese said, his voice flat. That's what we call ourselves, not traitors, visionaries. What is your purpose? Thomas asked. To prepare humanity for the only future that ensures survival. Evolution through merger with the collective. Thomas leaned forward. You betrayed your own species. Billions died. Reese's eyes were vacant. Necessary losses. The weak must be culled so the strong can ascend. Who leads you? Anna demanded. The architect guides us all. He showed us the truth. And who is the architect? Thomas pressed. A ghost of a smile crossed Reese's face. One you all trusted. One of Earth's greatest generals. Eliza interrupted, checking her instruments. Captain, his neural patterns are destabilizing. The implant is fighting the suppressant. Reese, what is the convergence? Thomas asked quickly. The final phase. The architect is gathering us. Proxima Centauri. The gateway. Reese's body suddenly stiffened, his back arching in pain. He is preparing the path. Blood began to trickle from Reese's nose and ears. Eliza, rushed forward with emergency medical equipment, but it was too late. The implant had triggered some kind of neural failsafe. Reese's last words were barely audible as he died. "You cannot stop what's coming. We are the future." Later, Thomas stood in the ship's meeting room with his team, the star maps of Proxima Centauri displayed on the main screen. "So we have a destination," Anna said. "And a lot of questions," Marcus added. "What's the gateway? Who is the architect?" Thomas studied the map, his expression grim. "Whatever they're planning, it's happening at Proxima Centauri. That's where we're going next." He looked at his team. The hunt for the traitors had taken a darker turn than any of them had expected. This wasn't just about finding collaborators. Something worse was brewing in the shadows of the galaxy. "Set course for Proxima Centauri," he ordered, "and prepare for anything." The UES Vengeance dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of light, emerging near the second planet of Proxima Centauri. Captain Thomas Reed stood on the bridge, looking at the main screen as the planet came into view. Once a thriving, mining colony with over 50,000 people, it was now a dead world. The collective had hit it early in the war and no one had returned since. "Scan the planet," Thomas ordered. "Look for any signs of recent activity." Marcus worked his console, his face lit by the blue glow of the screens. "I'm picking up strange energy readings from the surface, Captain, centered around the old colonial administrative complex. Definitely not natural." "Any ships in orbit?" Anna asked from the tactical station. "None that I can detect," Marcus replied. "But there are some unusual energy distortions that could be masking signatures." Thomas studied the readouts. "We can't risk the Vengeance being spotted. We'll take the shuttle down. Anna, you'll remain in command up here." Anna frowned. "Sir, with respect, I should go with you." "No, Lieutenant. If something happens to us, someone needs to get this information back to Earth." Thomas selected his ground team. Marcus to handle any technical systems they encountered, Dr. Eliza Voss to analyze any collective technology, and 2 security officers, Tanner and Rivera. They armed themselves with weapons effective against both human and collective targets. The shuttle landed a kilometer from the complex to avoid detection. The sky above them was a dull red, the ground bare rock. Nothing lived on the surface anymore. "Radiation levels normal," Eliza said, checking her scanner. "Air is thin but breathable." They moved carefully across the barren landscape, staying low and using the rocky terrain for cover. When they reached the edge of the complex, Thomas held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. The colonial facility had once been impressive, a dome of steel and glass built to house the administrative offices for the planet's mining operations. Now most of the dome was shattered, the buildings within partially collapsed, but lights glowed from below ground level, where the secure areas would have been. "The main entrance is probably watched," Thomas said. "We'll use the emergency access shaft." They circled around to a small metal hatch half hidden by fallen debris. Marcus bypassed the old security system, and the hatch slid open with a groan of metal. One by one, they climbed down the ladder into darkness. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. Thomas activated his light, illuminating a narrow corridor. Dust covered everything except for a set of footprints leading deeper into the facility. "Someone's been here recently," Tanner whispered, pointing to the tracks. "Multiple people." They followed the footprints through the winding corridors of the underground complex. The further they went, the more signs of recent activity they found: powered equipment, fresh supplies, new security cameras that they carefully avoided. Eventually, they reached a heavy door marked Colonial Archive. The footprints led inside, and faint voices could be heard. "Ready weapons," Thomas whispered. "Remember, we need prisoners for questioning." On his count of 3, Rivera used a breaching charge on the door. It blew inward with a bang, and Thomas led the charge through the smoke. What they found inside stopped them all cold. The large room had been converted into a laboratory of some kind. Along the walls were hundreds of stasis pods, each containing a human body. Medical equipment connected to each pod fed tubes into the occupants, and at the base of each person's skull was the same type of implant they had seen on Reese. "My God," Eliza breathed. "They're converting them." In the center of the room stood several people in medical garb, clearly surprised by the intrusion. Thomas recognized two of them from Admiral Porter's files, ascended traitors. "Hands up," Thomas shouted. "You're under arrest for treason against Earth." Instead of surrendering, one of the scientists hit an alarm. Red lights began flashing as security doors slammed shut. From side doors, armed guards rushed in. Some human, others clearly modified with collective technology grafted to their bodies. "Take cover," Thomas yelled as energy beams cut through the air. The team scattered, diving behind equipment. Rivera wasn't fast enough. A beam caught him in the chest, and he dropped without a sound. Thomas returned fire, dropping one of the guards. Tanner threw a stun grenade, temporarily disorienting several attackers. Marcus made it to a computer terminal and started downloading data. "Captain," Eliza called from behind a row of stasis pods. "These people are still alive. They're civilians, refugees from the war." "Can you free them?" Thomas asked, firing again to keep the guards pinned down. "Not safely. The process has gone too far for some. Removing them incorrectly would kill them." A new wave of attackers entered from another door, cutting Thomas off from the rest of his team. He rolled behind a large piece of equipment, energy bolts striking all around him. He was trapped with no clear path to his team. From his position, he could see Marcus frantically working at the terminal while Tanner provided covering fire. Eliza was examining the pods, likely looking for a way to safely remove the occupants. Thomas needed to rejoin them, but 3 guards blocked his path. He checked his weapons charge, half depleted already. He wouldn't make it in a direct confrontation. That's when he noticed a service passage behind him. It might circle around to where his team was. He slipped inside just as more guards arrived. The passage was narrow and dark. Thomas moved as quickly as he dared, following the curve of the wall. He heard gunfire behind him, his team still fighting. Then he heard a different sound ahead, footsteps approaching. Thomas pressed himself against the wall, weapon ready. Around the corner came a woman in a military uniform that bore the rank of admiral. Thomas recognized her immediately, though he had thought her dead for years. Admiral Helen Davis had been his mentor when he first joined the fleet. She had disappeared during the Battle of Tau Ceti, her ship reportedly destroyed with all hands. Yet here she stood, alive, with the same implant at the base of her skull that marked all the ascended. "Thomas," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I had hoped you wouldn't be the one they sent." "Admiral Davis," he replied, keeping his weapon trained on her. "You're one of them." She didn't try to deny it. "I'm evolved, Thomas. I see things clearly, now." "You betrayed humanity," he said, anger rising in his voice. "People trusted you." "I'm trying to save humanity," she replied. "The collective showed me the truth. Alone, divided humans will never survive what's coming. The only path forward is evolution, becoming more than we are. By turning people into puppets, those are civilians in there. Volunteers," she said, though her eyes shifted away. "Mostly. Some need to be shown the way." Thomas tightened his grip on his weapon. "What is the gateway? What are you planning?" For a moment, Admiral Davis seemed to consider whether to tell him. Then she smiled slightly. "Why not? The gateway is nearly complete. It's a device designed to amplify a signal that will activate dormant neural seeds planted in millions of humans during the war. One broadcast and the architect will have his army of ascended throughout human territory." Thomas felt cold horror at her words. "That's your plan? Mass conversion against people's will?" "It's evolution, Thomas. You could join us. The architect values your skills." Thomas heard more gunfire from the main room. His team was still fighting. He needed to get back to them. "I'd rather die," he said. "That can be arranged," Davis replied, reaching for her weapon. Thomas fired first, hitting her in the shoulder. She fell back with a cry of pain, and he ran past her back toward the main room. He burst through the door to find Tanner down. But Marcus and Eliza had managed to free some of the people from the pods, those least affected by the conversion process. Among them was an older man who leaned heavily on Eliza. "Captain," Marcus called, "I got the data, but we need to leave now." Thomas laid down covering fire as they retreated toward the exit. The man with Eliza stumbled, and Thomas helped support him. "Who are you?" Thomas asked as they ran. "Professor William Turner," the man gasped. "Collective technology expert. They took me to help build the gateway." "Where is it?" Thomas demanded. "Epsilon Eridani," Turner replied. "In the dead zone, where the war started." They fought their way back to the surface, carrying their wounded and helping the civilians they had managed to rescue. Behind them, explosions rocked the facility as Marcus's parting gift, a computer virus, overloaded the power systems. As the shuttle lifted off, Thomas looked back at the burning complex. They had stopped one conversion center, but according to the data Marcus had stolen, there were more. And somewhere in the dead zone, the gateway neared completion. The hunt would continue. The bridge of the UES Vengeance was silent as Captain Thomas Reed finished his transmission to Earth. 2 weeks had passed since their escape from Proxima Centauri. They had sent their findings through secure channels to the few military leaders they still trusted. The response had been swift. "Message received and confirmed, Captain," Marcus said from his station. "Task Force Nemesis is officially activated." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of command grow heavier. No longer would the Vengeance hunt alone. 2 additional ships had been assigned to their mission, the UES Defiant and the UES Harbinger. Together, they would make their final push to stop the Ascended. "Captain," Anna called from Tactical, "the Defiant and Harbinger have arrived and are taking formation." On the main screen, 2 warships appeared, moving into position alongside the Vengeance. The Defiant was a heavily armed destroyer, while the Harbinger specialized in electronic warfare. Together they formed a powerful combat unit. "Open a channel to both ships," Thomas ordered. The faces of 2 captains appeared on the screen. Captain Lisa Reeves of the Defiant was a veteran of the Mars campaign. Captain David Chen of the Harbinger had once served under Thomas during the early days of the war. "Welcome to Task Force Nemesis," Thomas said. "You've been briefed on our mission. We're heading into the dead zone to find and destroy the gateway before the Ascended can activate it." "The dead zone hasn't been approached since the first year of the war," Captain Chen noted. "Collective defenses were too strong. And it's where we lost the Third Fleet," added Captain Reeves. 40,000 personnel, no survivors. Thomas nodded grimly. "Which is why the Ascended chose it. They think we're afraid to return." He called up the tactical display showing Epsilon Eridani. Professor Turner, now recovering in the Vengeance's medical bay, had provided crucial details about the gateway. "Our target is here," Thomas said, highlighting a point in space. According to Professor Turner, the gateway is a massive device capable of broadcasting a signal throughout human space. If activated, it will trigger the neural seeds the Collective planted in millions of humans during the war, creating instant Ascended loyalists everywhere, Captain Reeves said with disgust. "Exactly. We can't let that happen. We jump in, destroy the gateway, and capture the architect if possible." "And if it's not possible?" Captain Chen asked. Thomas's expression hardened. "Then we make sure the traitor doesn't leave the dead zone alive." As they approached the jump point to Epsilon Eridani, Thomas visited Professor Turner in the medical bay. The older man looked better than when they had rescued him, but the trauma of captivity still showed on his face. "How are you feeling, Professor?" Thomas asked. "Better, thank you," Turner replied. "Dr. Voss says the effects of the partial conversion are fading." Thomas sat beside the bed. "We're about to enter the dead zone. Is there anything else you can tell me about what we'll face?" Turner's eyes grew distant. "The architect has gathered most of the Ascended there. The facility is well defended, a space station of hybrid human collective. Design, they call it Evolution's Cradle." He shuddered. "I helped build parts of it before I realized what it was for." "And the architect? Did you ever meet him?" "Once. Turner said quietly. He visited to check on the gateway's progress. The others treated him like a god. Who is he, Professor? Turner looked Thomas in the eye. General Richard Maxwell. Thomas felt like he'd been struck. Maxwell had been Earth's most celebrated military strategist, the hero who planned the defensive actions that saved Earth during the initial collective invasion. That's not possible, Thomas whispered. Maxwell died stopping the collective advance at Saturn. No, Turner said. He was taken. Converted. He's been working for them from the beginning, Captain. The greatest betrayal of all. The 3 ships of Task Force Nemesis emerged from the jump into the Epsilon Eridani system. Immediately, their sensors picked up the massive energy readings of the gateway. My God, Anna whispered as the main screen showed their target. It was a space station unlike anything they had seen before, part human design, part collective. It stretched several kilometers in length, with a central dish array pointed toward Earth. Around it orbited defensive platforms and several ascended vessels. They've spotted us, Marcus reported. Enemy ships moving to intercept. All ships, battle stations, Thomas ordered. Defiant, take point. Harbinger, begin electronic countermeasures. Vengeance will target the station's main defenses. The space around them lit up with weapons fire as the battle began. The Defiant surged forward, its heavy guns tearing through the first wave of ascended ships. The Harbinger released a swarm of drones that confused enemy targeting systems. The Vengeance took heavy fire as it pushed toward the station. Warning alarms blared as systems began to fail. Shields at 40%, Anna reported. Hull breaches on decks 5 and 6. The Harbinger is hit badly, Marcus called out. They've lost engines. Thomas watched as the Defiant took the brunt of the enemy fire, creating an opening. This is our chance. Prepare the strike team. Minutes later, Thomas led a team of 12 soldiers in the Vengeance's assault shuttle. They launched toward the station as their ships continued to exchange fire with the ascended fleet. The Defiant is critically damaged. Anna's voice came through the comm as they approached the station. Captain Reeves is ordering evacuation. Thomas watched through the shuttle viewport as the Defiant exploded in a brilliant flash of light. He silently vowed that their sacrifice would not be in vain. The shuttle docked at an emergency airlock Marcus had identified. They cut their way inside and were immediately met with resistance. The corridors of the station were a nightmare blend of human and collective technology, with organic-looking components growing from metal walls. Fighting was intense as they pushed toward the central chamber where the gateway controls would be. Thomas lost 4 of his team before they reached the main corridor leading to their target. Almost. There, Thomas said as they paused to regroup. Marcus, Eliza, work on disabling the gateway. The rest of us will handle any resistance. They burst into the central chamber, a massive room dominated by control stations surrounding a glowing core. And there, standing at the main console, was General Richard Maxwell. Unlike the other Ascended they had encountered, Maxwell appeared almost normal until he turned. Half of his face was covered with collective technology, his left eye replaced with a glowing blue implant. Captain Reed, Maxwell said, his voice still carrying the commanding tone that had once inspired millions. You're too late. The gateway sequence has already begun. General Maxwell, Thomas replied, keeping his weapon trained on the man. Or should I call you the architect? Maxwell smiled, a disturbing sight with his half-mechanical face. Titles don't matter now. All that matters is the evolution of our species. You betrayed everything you swore to protect, Thomas said. You led the collective to our worlds. Billions died. Necessary sacrifices, Maxwell replied. I saw the truth when they first took me at Saturn. Humanity is too weak, too divided, to survive what's coming. The collective showed me the path to our survival, unity through ascension. Behind Maxwell, the gateway core pulsed with increasing energy. Marcus and Eliza were working frantically at a side console trying to stop the broadcast. Captain, Eliza called. We can't stop it directly. The systems are locked. Maxwell laughed. In 3 minutes, the signal will broadcast. Millions of humans with dormant neural seeds will join us. The Ascended will become the majority, and the old humanity will fade away. Thomas raised his weapon. Not if I stop you first. Maxwell moved with inhuman speed, knocking the weapon from Thomas's hand. Enhanced by collective technology, the general was stronger than any normal human. He grabbed Thomas by the throat and lifted him off the ground. You can't stop evolution, Captain. As Thomas struggled for breath, Eliza shouted from the console, I have an idea. The signal pattern. I can invert it. Maxwell turned toward her, momentarily distracted. Thomas broke free and tackled the general. They crashed into a control panel, fighting desperately. Do it, Eliza, Thomas shouted as he struggled to hold Maxwell. It might kill the already ascended, she warned. The neural feedback. Do it now, Thomas ordered. As Maxwell threw Thomas across the room, Eliza completed her modification. The gateway core changed color from blue to red. Maxwell staggered, clutching his head as the inverted signal affected his implants. What have you done? He gasped. Changed your signal, Eliza said. Instead of creating new ascended, it's disrupting the neural connections of those already converted. Around them, the other ascended in the room collapsed, their implants overloading. Maxwell fought against the effect, stumbling toward the controls. I need to get to Earth, he growled. This can't be the end. It is for you, Thomas said, retrieving his weapon. He fired a stun blast that finally brought Maxwell down. The station shuddered as the gateway core began to overload. Warning alarms blared throughout the station. We need to get out of here, Marcus said. The whole place is going to blow. Thomas moved to Maxwell's unconscious form. Bring him. He'll answer for his crimes. They fought their way back to the shuttle, dragging the prisoner with them. As they launched from the dying station, they watched the gateway begin to break apart, its power core creating a miniature sun that consumed the entire structure. The battle was over. The gateway was destroyed. And the Architect. 1 year had passed since the battle at Epsilon Eridani. Captain Thomas Reed stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned UES Phoenix, watching as workers completed the final sections of Earth's reconstructed orbital defense platform. The massive structure gleamed in the sunlight, a symbol of humanity's recovery. Quite a view, isn't it? Said a familiar voice. Thomas turned to see Lieutenant Anna Wilson, now Captain Wilson, approach. She wore the insignia of her own command on her uniform. The best view in the system, Thomas agreed. How's the Vengeance treating you? Anna smiled. She's a good ship. We just returned from hunting down an ascended cell near Alpha Centauri. Small group, but dangerous. Thomas nodded. After the destruction of the gateway, the hunt for remaining ascended traitors had continued. Some had been captured, others eliminated. The immediate threat had passed, but the work was far from over. And the neural restoration program? He asked. Dr. Voss reports an 87% success rate now, Anna replied. Her modified signal from the gateway gave us the key to reversing the conversion process for those who weren't too far gone. It had been an unexpected benefit of their mission. Eliza's inverted gateway signal had provided the basis for a treatment that could remove collective implants and restore most ascended to their human consciousness. Thousands had been saved, though many still struggled with the memory of what they had done while under collective influence. The Admiral is waiting for us, Thomas said, checking the time. We shouldn't keep him waiting. Admiral James Porter had survived the attack on Artemis Station, though he now used a powered exoskeleton to move. His office in Earth Defense Headquarters overlooked the rebuilt skyline of New Geneva. Reed Wilson, he greeted them as they entered, right on time. Seated in the office was Marcus, now a commander, and Dr. Eliza Voss, recently appointed head of the Xenobiology Research Institute. Their team, reunited. I'll get straight to the point, Porter said. You've all seen the long-range scan data. He activated a holographic display showing strange energy patterns at the edge of the galaxy. The readings were unlike anything in human records, swirling distortions in space that defied known physics. We've been detecting these anomalies for the past 3 months, Porter continued. They're growing stronger and they're moving toward populated space. Do we know what they are? Thomas asked. No, Porter admitted, but someone might. The Admiral pressed another button and a security door opened. 2 guards led in a prisoner, General Richard Maxwell, the man once known as the Architect. His collective implants had been removed, leaving scarred tissue on the side of his face. He walked with a slight limp, his once powerful frame now diminished. "General," Thomas said coldly. Maxwell regarded them all with tired eyes. "I'm no longer a general, just a prisoner, a traitor as you call me." "You've asked to speak with Captain Reed," Porter said to Maxwell. "Here he is." Maxwell turned to Thomas. "You think you've won, don't you? Destroyed the gateway, dismantled the Ascended network, reversed the conversions, a great victory for humanity." "We stopped you," Thomas replied simply. Maxwell laughed, a hollow sound. "You've won nothing but time, Captain. The collective was merely the vanguard. They detected what's coming, what I saw in their memories." He pointed to the holographic display showing the strange anomalies. "That is what the collective was fleeing from when they encountered humanity. That is why they sought to convert, rather than simply destroy us. They needed soldiers, resources, new worlds." A chill ran through the room as his words sank in. "You expect us to believe that?" Anna asked skeptically. "The collective was running from something worse?" "Believe what you wish," Maxwell replied. "But I've seen it through their memories. The things that wait in the void between galaxies. The collective called them the Devourers. They don't conquer or convert, they simply consume, breaking down all matter and energy into their base components." Thomas studied the man who had once been Earth's greatest military mind before becoming its worst traitor. Was this just another manipulation? Another lie? "If what you're saying is true," Thomas said carefully, "then why betray humanity? Why not simply warn us?" Maxwell's scarred face twisted in what might have been regret. "Would you have believed me? Without evidence?" The collective offered a solution. Evolution beyond our fragile bodies, unity beyond our endless squabbling. I saw it as the only path to survival. "You chose to decide for all of humanity," Eliza said. "Billions died because of that choice." "Yes," Maxwell acknowledged. "I will carry that burden forever. But the threat is still coming. The question is, what will you do about it?" Later, in the Sentinel Council chamber, Thomas stood before the newly formed leadership group, military and civilian leaders tasked with preparing humanity for potential new threats. Admiral Porter presented the PIIQ, evidence they had gathered, including data cores recovered from Ascended facilities that partially corroborated Maxwell's claims. "The long-range scans show something approaching," Porter concluded. "We don't know if it's what Maxwell described, but we can't ignore the possibility." The council members looked troubled as they reviewed the information. "What do you recommend?" "Admiral?" asked the council chair. Porter turned to Thomas. "Captain Reed has a proposal." Thomas stepped forward. "We need to investigate these anomalies directly. I propose a special exploratory fleet to the galaxy's edge. If there is a threat coming, we need to know what we're facing." "And if there is no threat?" asked a counselor. "Then humanity will have expanded its knowledge of the universe," Thomas replied. "Either way, we win." After much debate, the council approved the mission. The Phoenix would lead a flotilla of 10 ships to the Galactic Rim with Thomas in command. Anna would captain the Vengeance as part of the fleet. 3 days later, Thomas stood on the bridge of the Phoenix as the crew made final preparations for departure. The ship hummed with energy, its powerful engines ready for the long journey. Ahead, Marcus entered the bridge, taking his position at communications. "All ships report ready, Captain." Eliza was staying behind to continue her research but had come aboard to see them off. "Be careful out there," she told Thomas. "Whatever these things are, don't take unnecessary risks." "We'll be cautious," Thomas promised. As the Phoenix led the flotilla away from Earth, Thomas thought about everything that had happened since that day on the observation deck of the Vengeance, watching the remains of the collective fleet. The war, the hunt for traitors, the revelation of a possibly greater threat. Humanity had faced extinction twice now, and survived. The fleet entered faster than light travel, stars streaking past the viewports as they began their journey to the edge of known space. Thomas received a message from the Vengeance, Anna's face appeared on his screen. Strange readings ahead, Captain. Shall we proceed? Thomas looked out at the stars, thinking of all that humanity had endured, and all that might still lie ahead. The hunt for traitors was ending, but perhaps a new hunt for knowledge, for survival, was just beginning. Always forward, Captain Wilson, he replied. The hunt continues. As the Phoenix raced toward the unknown, Thomas felt not fear, but determination. Whatever waited at the galaxy's edge, humanity would face it together, no longer naive, but still fundamentally human, their greatest strength in a universe of threats.